This episode of Fresh and Buds is brought to you by Florian's Rotwood Hamburgers. Come on down for the best hamburgers in Aria, folks. Fresh and Buds now.
Fresh and
All right, folks, welcome back to yet another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all of my buds. And today it is episode 156, and we are joined once again by Bryan Gottlieb. How are you doing, my friend? How's it going?
I am doing well. Last time I saw you, we were much wetter than these current circumstances. We were what river was that we were floating down? I don't even know.
I think it was the Raritan River or an offshoot of the Raritan River. We,
Okay.
you know, Brian and I, we were just out on the river. We were just talking about Riptide and stuff. If anybody needs to know, and just, big plans. So.
That's where I take all my Riptide-based meetings, is just floating down a river. I refuse to do them under any other circumstances. So
It makes sense. It makes sense. I hate to go to the Phi and Dromai meetings, but we can touch on that. I'm sure.
I don't enjoy those.
Yeah, I'm sure Mara
In a
knows.
volcano, just sweating the entire time.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming back on the show. This is very exciting. We're approaching 3 years of Fresh and Bud, so it's always nice to have a big guest here for the third year. I think anniversary is in a week or two, which is very cool. Very happy to be making content for you all for so long, and also really happy to have Bryan on again. So let's catch up, shall we?
Sure. What have you been up to? What's going on your end?
Nothing's going on with me. Nothing's going on. Actually, I had Elaine on last week, and she flipped the script on me, and I wasn't ready. I was like, oh, I'm getting married. That's something. And
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal, man.
yeah, it should be cool. It should be a good time. I'm excited. Unfortunately, probably gonna mean I miss Osaka, which is, I guess.
Look. It's a good reason. I wouldn't trade any other day of my life for my wedding day. It was incredible, having all my friends there. Obviously, marrying my lovely wife, all just irreplaceable. So Osaka is going to be amazing. But you have one of the very few acceptable reasons for missing it.
Yes, absolutely. And everybody else should be there at Osaka. Please do. It's going to be awesome. If the world premiere for MST was any indicator. Now, a lot for you has changed since we last had you on. We had you on last June. You're living life on both sides of the world. How's that going?
It's going well. It presents some unique challenges, but overall, it's something I enjoy. I'm not like a stay in one place type person. That's really hard for me. I just have like wanderlust and I get restless. So this kind of like two-place solution is good. It's working out well for me, and I like I said, there's things I have to address about it, but overall it's very, very cool to have different aspects of my working life. Like I kind of get to focus on different things while I'm in each place, and there's a lot of different tasks I need to get done, and having spaces that are better suited towards each of those tasks, it's really, really interesting. It's working for me as a workflow.
That's awesome. And I'm sure that when you're down in the Southern Hemisphere, as awesome as it is, there is a difference in culture, from North America and the Northern Hemisphere in general compared to the Southern Hemisphere. So I have to imagine it's good to kind of retouch with that, to bring it back to LSS, to kind of like, hey, listen, this is what's going on in the world. And, this is how people think in different parts of the world, especially about card games, which is pretty cool. Now, in between New Zealand and the States, there is Europe in kind of a way. And in Europe, we just had another Pro Tour Amsterdam, the second European Pro Tour. And from your keynote speech, I believe there'll be a third one next year, which is very exciting. How did your experience go in Pro Tour Amsterdam? You wore a couple different hats. You were a caster, obviously, your job at LSS, your dev, kind of perspective you brought to it. But you also filled in Mr. White's shoes as the keynote speaker.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot to handle, a lot to do. I mean, it was great. I had a really good time. It's those weekends are so valuable for so many reasons. It's just great to reconnect with the player base and spend a bunch of time around everyone. And hear everyone's thoughts and just be there on the ground. I think that is indispensable to what we do because we make the game for our players. Like I just need to be plugged in that scenario. It's the chief reason why I do these events is just keeping my finger on the pulse of what's going on and getting that on the ground experience. So all of that stuff was great. Obviously, it was a huge honor to be able to deliver the keynote. I It's weird. I don't get nervous, and I don't say that. Sometimes when you say that, I think it kind of comes off as like a brag, like, "Oh, I'm so comfortable doing this." No, I think I'm broken. Like I'm just broken inside where like I can't get that fear to boil up because I'm just so care a lot. It's not that I don't care, but I just know like what's the worst that could happen? Like I look stupid. I've looked stupid so many times in my life. Like it's just not anything new. And anyone who like puts themselves out there in public spaces will be made to look stupid from time to time. It's just how this stuff goes. And I don't have the fear of that. I don't have the fear of like disappointing people because I know how hard we work on these things. And, I knew we had a bunch of really cool stuff to announce. So that wasn't part of it. And if I messed up, I messed up and I would move on. And so it was a weird experience to take on because everyone expected me to be very nervous about it. And I was just like, no, that's all good. Like, I'll just deliver this stuff and share it with people. And I think it went very, very well. I think James was satisfied that I did a good enough job in his stead. But I will happily relinquish that job back to him come Osaka. It's not something I want to do every time out. But like a lot of the things I do around these weekends, there's just kind of like a hole and somebody needs to fill it and I do it. And I don't know. Like I don't know if I'm the right person for it. People seem to think I'm like into this public speaking thing. I'm not. I have like severe social anxiety and I feel very awkward when I'm doing these things, but for whatever, and that goes to like casting as well. Like if you gave me the choice, I don't ever want to appear on video ever again, including this. Like I just don't like being in these scenarios, but I think I'm pretty good at it. I think it's something that is valuable for me because as a person, I want to kind of sink into a shell and be like isolated and not be social. And despite the fact that that's what my core essence is screaming at me to do, like don't talk to anyone, stay away. I get a lot of joy from those moments that I share with other people. So I saw something about introverted people yesterday, and a theory that it's not so much they don't want to be around people, they just want to feel safe and
Mhm.
comfortable. And so when you're around people who make you feel safe and comfortable, then you no longer feel introverted. And I find a lot of times when I'm with the flesh and blood community, I get that sentiment where I just feel welcome and I feel safe. And so I'm able to overcome that sort of lack of desire to be in these public spaces. And I just think I want to do what's best for the game because I care so much about it. And a lot of times that involves me getting up on stage and potentially making an ass of myself. But it seems like it went well enough. So
Well, it really did. And I mean, good news for you, Brian. Most of our listeners listen audio only. So don't even worry about the video
fantastic.
part. So, it was awesome. And like the nice thing about it is you're delivering information that people are excited about. That's like the best thing about it, right? It could be, it would be tough if you had to get up there and do maybe the banned and suspended announcement on stage.
Yeah, I'm glad that one isn't done live.
Yeah, that one probably best from behind the keyboard a little bit, but it was a excellent job. And I tell you what, the casting, the whole production, and a lot of people were making this joke. The light of Solana was shining on you. That was the only thing in the whole day or the whole weekend that people were noticing. But other than that, the production was amazing. I obviously shout out to Ethan, all of them, and the other casters. Beyond the keynote speech and into the Pro Tour, how was it watching this post Bands of Ancestry kind of world unfold, where we obviously saw a huge surge in some assassins doing very well?
Yeah, I want to talk about the metagame. I will answer that question.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned my fellow casters. And I just want to take a second to shout them out. They've all worked so hard at their craft. And like in the same way that I'm telling you, I often have put myself out there in uncomfortable spots. I think a lot of them are very similar. Like I know I made Ponkage do the check award ceremony. He was like the MC, the hype man on the stick. And he's like, I can't do this. I'm not hype. And I'm like, you can do this. I believe in you. And all of those casters from Erica and Roman and Kieran have worked so hard on their craft and getting better and practicing. I'm just so proud of them. And I'm also really thankful that I work with folks who have this like self-improvement attitude, right? They're all always pushing themselves and trying to get better. And that's a really, really cool environment to be in. So I appreciate that you mentioned them. I do think they did a tremendous job and should be very much lauded for it. And same with Ethan. Ethan is like the poster child for self-improvement. He is a guy who started streaming Battle Hardens out of a backpack because he wanted this to happen. And to see what he's capable of now, like, let's not mince words. We're still operating on what is ostensibly a shoestring budget. To compare us to, say, Magic's Pro Tours is ridiculous. They roll in with a 40-person production team and production trucks, and it's just not a fair comparison. Despite that, I think we do a good job of holding our own given the budget that we have for our events and kind of the homemade technology solutions we're using. And look, I wish we could roll up with $1 billion budget for these Pro Tours. I would love that, but the reality is we're just not that large of a business, and you know, the viewership isn't there yet. Someday it might be. I'm all for that. But in the meantime, we have to kind of glue some stuff together to make a nice production. And the folks who are working to do that are just so good at what they do. I'm so thankful that they care so much about this game and have devoted themselves to putting on these weekends for the viewers.
Yeah. And I got to say, you know, to kind of come back to the casters as well, you know, Ponkage has become one of these all-stars in the booth. It was really cool to see Mr. Classic in there. And then we always love seeing Ramon and Erica at these European events, you know, and their personalities they bring to it and kind of representing the Europeans, you know, from 2 different countries there. Yeah, 2 different regions really of Europe, which is very cool. And cool to just see like such a diverse kind of cast of characters that you have behind the booth, as well as supporting it as well. So I do want to say kudos, and I believe most of the buds, every bud listening, agrees as well. Now, the metagame. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about the metagame.
You know, we know who won. Shoma won with Uzuri. One of 2 Uzuris that showed up to the tournament and kind of blew everybody away. I'm sure that was very exciting for you as a assassin guy. Could you have predicted her taking down the tournament like that? And what were some other things that you noticed from this kind of post-Bonds ban that we saw?
Yeah, it's funny. I would not have predicted it. I'm not going to claim that. But I will say that our dev team internally, in this metagame, like we're past this point now internally, but when we were in this metagame, particularly as we moved into Rosetta a little bit, they started identifying that Uzuri actually felt like it may have been better positioned than Nu. And that's not like to say Uzuri is more powerful than Nu. That's not to say in the default, you should pick Uzuri over Nu. That's saying when the metagame gets warped in certain directions, Uzuri has a very, very important role to play. The way a bunch of heroes in our game have important roles to play and will pick up kind of these key spots where they're meant to succeed. And we did identify that Uzuri had some real spots coming up, particularly after Rosetta, where we thought she could be an absolute player. And we started to put her above Nu kind of in our power rankings for a little while. Did I think it was going to happen at this event? No, absolutely not. And a lot of times, I'll be honest, like we spot these things internally and predict them internally, and they just don't come to fruition in the real world. Either there's something slightly different in the real world, or, you know, players out there don't see it the same way we do. All those things are possible. So I could not have predicted it in a million years, but I also knew Uzuri was quite good coming into this event. And once I was watching Shoma play, and particularly how his deck was constructed, I think I said it maybe as we went into the top 8, maybe even like as we were getting to the tail end of day 2, where I was just like, yep, this is the correct choice for this metagame. Like you just see the advantages that this deck is having. Uh, but it was for this metagame, and you asked kind of about this metagame broadly and my thoughts on it. And my thoughts are complicated. It's not my favorite metagame we've ever had. I'll just be frank about that. I can point to several I've enjoyed better. It is a more narrow metagame. It is unquestionably focused on and around Zen. Everything spirals off Zen. Um, and I think there's a very good argument that Zen's output is a little higher than we're comfortable with and, shapes the game in certain ways. Now, that being said, do I think the game collapses under the weight of Zen? Absolutely not. There were tremendous games all weekend. There were tremendous innovations to be found from folks like Shoma. If you looked at undefeated decks after day one, I believe there were 12 different heroes putting up undefeated records. None of that is to say that Zen didn't shape the metagame. It absolutely did. But there were still angles. There were still plays to make. They were just all very Zen-centric. And I don't think that's the best version of a Flesh and Blood metagame. I don't think it should all stem off of one deck, particularly off of one aggro deck. And one aggro deck that is just kind of linear numbers. Those decks need to exist in the game. They're an important check on things. You always want to have those linear number aggro decks. But if the numbers get a little bit out of whack, it can kind of restrict space pretty dramatically, particularly for mid-range style decks. I'm thinking of KO in particular. Like KO has just really suffered under this metagame because it can't compete with those raw numbers. It doesn't have enough disruption to actually keep Zen off those raw numbers. So it just feels like there's no real role for decks like that to play. And that's disappointing. So not my favorite metagame, but I thought it was a great event, an acceptable metagame, and we'll continue to evolve the metagame with Rosetta. I don't want folks to feel like this is the end of the road and everything is just about Zen forever. That's not how things work in Flesh and Blood. I try to just emphasize this over and over and over. No matter what we do, no matter what the thing is, we do a thing, and then everyone goes, they're doing the thing this way now. It's always going to be like that. Always. It doesn't matter what the thing is. That is always the response to thing. But that's never the way it works. Never, ever the way it works. Things change. Things evolve. Things rapidly change. So I am confident things will rapidly change again. And if folks didn't love this metagame, fair. You don't have to love every metagame. I understand. We'll work on it. We'll learn a lot from this metagame for sure. I feel like we've already learned a tremendous amount from this Zen metagame. To the folks who did enjoy this metagame, of which I spoke to many, I don't want to paint it as the prevailing opinion, but certainly a lot of folks liked the very narrow approach. Particularly Zen players are having a really good time. They like that aggro combo focused build. So there are people who are being served by this metagame. I don't want to kind of ignore their experience. And that's just the reality of game designing, is you're designing for so many people who want entirely different things. Everyone expects something different from Flesh and Blood. And all we can do is kind of cycle through those things and offer different experiences over and over. And we're going to keep doing that. So that is my broad take on the metagame. If there's any specifics you would like me to expand upon, I'm happy to do so.
I do have some questions about Zen and the band, but to kind of touch on your point that people do enjoy this, right? Like there are people out there that enjoy it clearly, right? And even like I will say, watching some of those Zen mirrors, they were very exciting to watch, and there were a lot of interesting decisions to be made, right? Sometimes. Thinking back to Michael Dalton, like double art award at US Nats, a little bit different, but at the Pro Tour, there were a lot of interesting mirror matches there. It's worth noting, I went to a Blitz Armory over the weekend, and I don't really play a lot of Blitz, and Blitz is another kind of format right now that's a little bit under Zen's domain, maybe even more so than CC, because there's just less life to work with. And, I'm thinking in my mind, well, then nobody's gonna bring Zen. That's not fun. But it is fun to some people. They want to do that. And lo and behold, a couple people brought Zen. They did very well. And I had to look at myself. I was like, oh, okay. It's fun for somebody, maybe not anybody else at the armory, but they are having a good time there. So, that splits, but I want to talk more focused on CC because I can't really speak to a lot of Blitz stuff anyway. Zen had the ban, the Bonds of Ancestry ban, and we're seeing how it kind of unfolded at Amsterdam. Do you think that was the right balance, or could it have been more heavy-handed?
I'm comfortable with the decision given the circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
and that circumstance was there was a pro tour 3 weeks away.
Mm-hmm.
I think had there not been that pro tour, and had we been more comfortable with sort of sending the format into a tailspin, we could have done more in that window. I think that would have been a totally reasonable approach. But again, it comes back to the exact same scenario where we're serving a lot of different people and a lot of people who want different things. Look, there were people who trashed us for doing anything. They thought it was completely inappropriate to go ahead and do bans in this spot. So there you go. I mean, you can just see clear evidence of people who are just of a very different mindset when it comes to these things. And we have to serve those people. We have to serve the people who feel like Zen is dominating and want to see it toned down a little bit. So you kind of have to leave everyone a little bit mad at you, I think is the solution you're looking for in that spot. I think we did that. Like, does that feel good? No, not always. But I think we found the best way to go ahead and preserve some semblance of the metagame that people had been engaging with all of that time. So they didn't feel like all the hard work they had done has completely wiped off the board, completely reset. We also just brought things down a little bit where Zen could be challenged more effectively. I think gameplay got significantly better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, there were still moments where Zen could blow you up, but I think we saw in one of the Zen mirrors, I forget which two players it was, but I feel like it was Bartosz's maybe round of the quarterfinal round where put together a double bonds turn, and both players in the match were like, oh, this is the first double bonds turn I have seen the entirety of this weekend. I'm like, that's good. I think the double bonds turn, triple bonds turn even they were huge problems. And I'm happy we were able to work that out of Zen's arsenal. So yeah, a mixed bag is all I can say to that. I think given the circumstance we were facing, I'm happy with the decision we made.
Yeah, and the two main things I've seen people talk about still after everything, right, is first traverse, right? The reward for blocking in an aggro deck, I think, is something that comes up quite a bit. And I think it's a totally fair card in probably the other two heroes, but I think people do point to traverse a lot when talking about Zen currently and its power level. Can you speak to that, if there's been any kind of internal kind of, maybe we were a bit off the mark on traverse being available in Zen?
I think we were off the mark with it being available. My actual biggest regret from all of Part the Misfail is that traverse blocks for 2. Like, it's just too much. And like, I am comfortable with the idea of turning defense into offense. That was obviously the intention behind traverse. That's all it can really do. That second point of defense, though, just was not necessary in retrospect, and especially because of how it affects disruption and how it affects the breakpoints on those disruptions and all the cascades that came from that. So I think we dropped the ball a little bit on that one. If traverse defended for 1, I would be so much more comfortable with what it offers in the metagame. As it stands, 2's a lot. 2's very powerful. But I think you're exactly right that outside the context of Zen, it's mostly fine. It is still unquestionably powerful in Enigma, using it to, transition into a manifestations turn. Yeah, that's big. But it was supposed to be big. Like, we aimed very, very high on that card. It is in Zen where it starts to push a little bit. And, it's only because of the other things that Zen can do with that chi does it really start to push into that problematic range. But it does push into that range. And I think it would be unfair not to acknowledge that. So all I can say is lesson learned. We have to think about how we combine that type of effect with defensive value, with immediate transition into offense as Zen does it. But it is what it is. Like I don't want to disavow mistakes we make. I want to own them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mistake. I wish we had a better solution there. But all we can do is move forward from that. And if you think this is the last mistake we're ever going to make, I I have bad news for you. There will be more mistakes in the future, and we will own those and we will move forward from them. It just is what it is. Game development is so hard. There's so many moving pieces. And I don't say this because I want anyone to feel bad for me. I want to be great at my job. I don't ever want to make a mistake. I don't take it lightly when I make a mistake. And I certainly have regret around those things. But they're going to happen. Like it kind of goes back to the same attitude of like, why am I not nervous to give a big speech? Well, people mess up. People are human. People make mistakes. And I know I accept others when they make those mistakes. I know people will accept me when I make those mistakes. If I do so with humility, if I do so as a learning opportunity, that's all I can really do. And that's kind of the attitude I have, particularly around Traverse. And it's just a very clear, immediate like takeaway I can get from Traverse was just sort of check the defensive breakpoints that you've offered when you get to this point. And when you cross the number 6, it starts to be a very big problem. Mm-hmm. And particularly if you can push into 7, then it's a massive problem. And I just will always have that heuristic going forward. And it's very easy to say, well, that's an obvious heuristic. You always should have had that. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but the reality is that you build up kind of these internal checklists. And for all the internal checklists you make, you also break them. It's not like we're unaware 6 is an important breakpoint, especially when it comes to armor. But every now and then you go, let's push the boundaries a little bit. Let's let this happen. Let's provide this powerful experience. And if you don't do that, the game will stagnate. It won't move forward in interesting ways. You have to be willing to take risks. So again, acknowledging these things as a mistake, I'm just going to treat them as a useful mistake, and we're going to improve the next go around.
And that's a great way to approach it. I mean, these games are, the engine's very fine margins, right? It just takes a little bit to push it past, what might be too much for people.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because I've been thinking about that a lot lately. There's another game out there that is doing a lot of strange things, interesting things. And one of the things they're doing is like unique cards, where the cards are actually the same card, but they have fundamentally different values depending on who pulls them. And everyone's like, oh, it's okay. They just adjust things by like 1 or 2 points. And I'm like, wait, what? There's never been a TCG in the history of the world where you adjust things by 1 or 2 points and they don't just completely shatter the game. Now, maybe this game's different. I honestly know nothing about the game beyond this like weird little quirk of it. And maybe the rules just make it so it's not meaningful. But to me, I'm like, are people taking crazy pills? Like if you just randomly changed 1 or 2 numbers on like, seriously, probably hundreds of our cards, I think you could legitimately break the game very, very quickly. So it'll be interesting to see that one develop a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think I know which one you're talking about, too. Now, the other thing that I do hear a lot about, and you probably can't answer this one, but people are begging for ice in CC again. And I mean, I'm not
on right where we want him, baby. That was the plan, the evil plan all along. You thought you hated ice. Now you come knocking back on Ice's door. Please come back and save us, Ice. We miss you.
I haven't forgotten. God damn it. I don't want the ice back. But I mean, well, I play Riptide. That's obviously why. But can you elaborate on Ice's return? I know that, returning to Aria and not seeing Ice certainly gets people's interest piqued a bit. Yep. Is there anything you can elaborate on there?
Ice is coming back at some point. Like that is an inevitability. It's not in Rosetta. There's not like, people are always waiting for that secret swerve, I think. We're like, oh, it's like there's a third element. It's not. It's not in Rosetta. We can just stop that now. But Ice will return to the game at some point. And it was really interesting kind of engaging with this format without Ice, right? Mm-hmm. Because it was always designed that it falls upon the assassins in that case to be the disruptive agents of the metagame. And they've delivered on that. And it's been nice to see, and kind of a change of pace. Somebody's got to be the police, and it's got to be assassins or ice, or there's got to be some way of slowing things down. And I think maybe this time without ice has let people think a little bit about what they want those options to be, because they do have to be present. And is it actually healthier for ice to be around than people thought it was the first go around? And I just want people to have a new lens when ice does return, and think about it a little bit, and ask if it was really as harmful as maybe it was often painted to be during the last time ice was within the metagame.
Yeah, well, we're all very excited to see what that means, and it's very, very exciting to see where it will go. Now, I do want to leave MST on a positive note here, because we talk about where the band's balanced enough, yada yada yada. Speaking of balance, I feel like this limited experience is or maybe close to one of the best draft experiences in the game so far. First of all, congrats, that's an awesome feat, and we're us drafters that love drafting are excited to see where that goes from here. Seeing macro be kind of spoiled during that was the keynote, right? And I wanted to know, how do you test a draft environment as devs? Do you like print, but do you just start printing up packs and stuff like that? Like, how does it go?
Yeah, we simulate packs.
Okay.
Like we basically know what our print runs will look like, what our print sheets will look like. We have, at this point, built out very, very nice methods for approximating what a real world pack will look like. And so we just draft a ton, and hundreds upon hundreds of drafts. Every single draft we can fit in with moving pieces all the time and little tweaks here and there. And it is a tremendous undertaking. It's a somewhere slightly less than the total amount of time we put into construct it across all formats is put into just the draft format. So it is a huge portion of our development process, and we care a lot about draft outcomes. And it's because we believe we can deliver outcomes like we saw with Part the Mistveil. And I am extremely proud of this draft environment. I think it is one of our biggest successes, not only in terms of balance, which sort of indisputably good, but in terms of archetypes within these heroes, the big blue archetypes and the varying ways you can actually build archetypes. It's really, really fun. I love drafting Part the Mistveil. I've spoken to many people who feel the exact same way. Self-critical lens on. Wish Manifestations of Miragai was worse. Like, it's pretty hard to beat. It was designed to be very hard to beat. Like, we wanted to have some of these experiences. We talk a lot about Flesh and Blood being a low variance game, and that's great. And we don't want to escape that. It's an important part of Flesh and Blood's identity. But everybody who works hard and puts in the reps and drafts a bunch of times should be able to win a draft every now and then. It just is supposed to happen that way. Otherwise, they will leave. They will stop playing draft if you don't make it enticing, where they can spike and high roll and really put together that awesome draft deck that is almost impossible to beat. You have to give people the opportunity to do that. Did it swing a little bit too far towards impossible to beat? Maybe it feels that way with Manifestation sometimes. But look, that just goes to show that even in spots where we have, I think, what is an indisputable home run, I think just unquestionably one of our best limited formats ever, always something to do better, always something to learn, and we're always striving for that. So despite the good that comes out of Part the Mistveil, we're going to keep refining it. We're going to keep getting better at it, and we're very excited about the future of Limited.
As am I. Best limited format so far, as they say, because we are excited for what comes out next. Rosetta is looking very cool. Now, we had a little bit of a sneak peek of Rosetta, at least in some of the cards, and I mean, not sure what is going to be actually in Rosetta through the First Strikes, but we just had the First Strikes kind of have this soft launch at Gen Con. Very, very cool. Something that a lot of people have been asking about for a long time. Like, we want a more refined experience to teach players. You in your keynote speech mentioned the Monarch Blitz decks, which I also started on those, and yes, I would have liked something a little bit closer to First Strike, which is very cool. How has the reception been from your or LSS's perspective so far, from the limited amount of data we've seen or whatever anecdotes from Gen Con?
Mind blowing. That's the only way I can put it. We sold a pair of First Strike decks every 2 minutes we were at Gen Con, which is kind of like somebody had to be basically in line all the time to buy these things the entire time we were there at Gen Con. So reception already extremely, extremely exciting. And this is a subtle product. I didn't know how the broader player base was going to take to it. I did certainly see some of it, but you could ostensibly go, oh, so they're just blitz decks. You're not wrong. They are. They are just blitz decks around these two heroes. But they were so purpose-driven, and I've never actually gone this deep into the new user experience before, but it was an effort to consider every single word that was going to appear on one of these cards. And I don't mean that in a broad sense. I mean, literally every single word we could pair out of the experience and still get to the place where you found what made Flesh and Blood sing, what makes it special. Because that's something that has become so clear to me about new player experiences over the years, especially in the TCG space. And I engage with lots of them because I play the vast majority of TCGs that come out. I just love learning about TCGs. I love experiencing them. And I am often very interested in how they present to a new player. And one of the things I find is that if you simplify the game too much, you make it too basic and kind of strip away all the things that make it special, you're not doing a good job telling people why they should care about this thing. You're letting them care about the thing. If they already care about it, it's a great way to get them to go ahead and learn the basics. But you're not telling them why they should care about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was the real challenge with First Strike, is we wanted to get to a place where there were as few words, as much simplicity as possible on these cards. But when you actually draw your 4 cards and you plan out your turn cycle, you still felt those moments that make Flesh and Blood special, where you empower your hero, things like Lightning Flow, where you see how these cards combine to become more than the sum of their parts, where you have to make tough decisions. Oh, I really want to defend with this card, but if I keep it for my next turn, then I can combine it with this card and it'll do this and I can unlock this. And the first moment you put together one of those badass combat chains with Aurora, it's unlocked. Like, you just feel it. It clicks for you. You go, oh, this is why this game is so special. And the same thing on the Terra side. As soon as you're able to combine your might tokens with buffs in a certain way and you make this massive attack, you get the sense of, oh, this game is special. And you also get the identity of these classes. You feel the big lumbering Earth Guardian, and you feel the sprightly, quick-moving Aurora. Like, all that stuff shines through in the experience, despite stripping out all of the excess, all of the stuff that isn't critical to understanding how the game operates. And that was the goal with these First Strike decks. And like I said, I could forgive someone for just looking at them and being like, just a blitz deck, simple product. I promise you, though, the experience of sitting down with these and introducing someone to Flesh and Blood via these decks, it just works. And it's so purpose-driven to work. It's something that was in design for a very long time. Very, very long time. And for how small the products are, right? They're just 2 blitz decks, and there's not that many new cards. And, obviously Aurora goes on to be in Rosetta. So it's a small experience, but they got a tremendous amount of focus, tremendous amount of design and development time, making sure that the experience that you get from this very, very small package sings. And that's why I just am very, very proud of First Strike. And I'm excited to see the reception of it so far, because I did think there was a world where you could just kind of write off this product and be like, just more blitz decks, too simple. And I think the Flesh and Blood community is showing a lot of trust in myself and James and our dev team and our vision of what we're presenting here. And kind of seeing the goals here and understanding why it is so important to have a product like this, not only in terms of what it offers, but also a clear identity. Like it's so clear that this is, if you're starting Flesh and Blood, go buy these 2 decks. That's it. There's no more BS where, oh, what class do you think you like? Well, here's a picture of this guy. Do you want to go ahead and get this Blitz deck? And that's kind of the way it worked up until this point. And you go to a store that doesn't know about Flesh and Blood, and they give you, well, here's a Viscerai Blitz deck and here's an Oldhim Blitz deck, and you get them home, and you're like, I'm so excited. I'm going to bring this to Armory, and you can't play them at Armory because they're not legal anymore. Like there's just a bunch of like roadblocks along the way that were preventing people from understanding what they were supposed to do as a new player, what they were supposed to buy, how they were supposed to start their journey. Short of the Ira decks, which are fantastic, but they have a very like pointed goal, right?
Mhm.
They're designed to show you the back and forth combat. But I don't think even those Ira decks, as fun as they are, they don't get to the heart of Flesh and Blood. They don't get to the uniqueness of the characters that you're going to be portraying. They are kind of like this very generic experience. And First Strike is the next step in that introductory experience. And I'm really, really proud of it. I hope everyone out there who wants to introduce Flesh and Blood to somebody new goes ahead and gives these a shot, because they are going to achieve that purpose.
Yeah, it's such a. I mean, in theory, I don't have them in my hand yet, but I watched people play it and watched the video on the Flesh and Blood YouTube channel. Excellent, seems really cool. The cards look very simple, but laid out for people. And something that I noticed was people, in the Bloods community being like, oh, what? I mean, I just wish it did this, right? Looking at a specific card, like, well, that's good that you wish that, because this is supposed to be super basic. And if you can wish that, the people that start playing with this, like, what if there's another card that I can add to this Terra deck or like whatever that is going to make this one really niche thing that I have way cooler, get them hooked. And I think that's in theory, a home run. Now, one last question about First Strikes, and something that I've wondered about and not sure has been answered is, clearly this is coming out. These characters are based in Aria right before Rosetta. Will there be other First Strike editions ahead of other major releases, or are we just leaving it at this First Strike for now?
There's nothing currently on the schedule. Kind of wanted to put it out there, see how it goes.
Mhm.
But certainly, should this product sing, should the appreciation for it be there, I could see us revisiting it in the future.
Cool. Very exciting. Now, I want to do a quick fresh faves. We'll do rapid fire, and then we have some listener questions to get to that were submitted by our wonderful listeners. We do the fresh faves. When you were first on, we asked your favorite cards in the game. I want to ask you your favorite Gottlieb era cards. Things that you've been involved with. So let's get right to it. Favorite hero from the Gottlieb era?
Missouri.
Understandable.
Easy.
Not Arachne? I know it's supposed to be quick fire, but
I do love Arachne, but Azuri is something special, I think. I think she offers something to Flesh and Blood that's really exciting. It's also one that I can just trace. When we develop and design these cards, there's little bits of myself, James, the dev team's input that goes into these cards over time. And it's often really, really hard even for me to remember like something like, that's mine, that's my concept. But I do remember bringing it to James basically in this form. And I think it had a cost on it, which in retrospect feels ridiculous. But at the time, I was, surely you can't do this for free. And I'm pretty sure that was James's first change, was just to make it free. And at that point, the hero didn't change much. It basically functioned in that way. There's a lot of like rules weirdness with Azuri and timing weirdness that we had to work through. But in terms of what the hero did, it basically ran through all of development in exactly the same fashion, which is awesome. Really, really exciting. So it's kind of the moment where I don't like, it's weird because obviously I had the hand in Arachne and the contract mechanic as well. Something about Azuri just like it felt like I got it. I'll be the first to tell you, when I started working on Flesh and Blood, I didn't yet have enough knowledge to be a great designer or a developer. Like I give a huge amount of credit to James and the rest of the team for kind of taking a lark on my abilities, despite the fact that I was lacking this sort of foundational knowledge. Because I'd only been playing the game at like for maybe like 2 to 3 months at that point, and I was still like making Magic content full time, so very much engaged with the Magic space. It wasn't like I was playing Flesh and Blood 12 hours a day. I kind of wanted to be at that point, but I still had other things that I was focused on. And when I first started working on the game, I still had so many holes in my knowledge base that I really needed to build up and understand. And so Azuri is the first time I really felt like I got it. Like I just had that solid foundation. And certainly elements of my design suggestions were very much embodied with Arachne. But yeah, Azuri just feels more real to me. I don't really know a better way to describe it.
Well, I mean, she just won her first Pro Tour, which is very cool. So very, very cool. Favorite Gottlieb era weapon?
Starfall is a good one. Is it still called Starfall? Is that what Aurora's weapon is called?
I believe so.
That might be the internal name.
Yeah.
Aurora's weapon.
Oh yeah.
It's one that I really do like. Sometimes it's just like you ask me these questions and it's like, oh, the most recent thing that I can think of in this moment, it does feel like maybe Aurora. Although Spider's Bite is another one that that was definitely a huge iterative one where just tons of input from myself, James, Chris Gehring, all of the dev team. That's not like a solo design idea on my part, but certainly the end result for that weapon, very, very satisfying. Very, very cool weapon and kind of unique in Fab, I think, to have this sort of overcosted, disruptive, piercing, badass weapon that has become so emblematic of what the assassin class does and how it operates. That's another one I'm very proud of.
Very cool. Favorite equipment?
I have to kind of go back through all of the sets that I've worked on, and I'm running through all of the legendary equipment in my mind. Oh, maybe it's in Rosetta, and I don't think you've seen it yet.
Oh no, I want to see it.
Yeah, you'll see it soon.
Oh,
You'll see it soon. Maybe I can give a temporary answer in the meantime.
well, if you're going by thematics, you mentioned Azuri, then Spider's Bite. I would have to imagine you'd want to throw that Spider's Bite at some point, right?
Yeah, Flick Knives is a good one. Definitely a very, very exciting card. It's up there. It's up there for sure.
It's a cool one. Well, I'm excited to see whatever the Rosetta one is. I guess we're a month out. We'll see. Hopefully.
So close. So close.
And then favorite, cards you throw in your deck.
Still have a soft spot for Last Ditch Effort. I don't think it's very good anymore, but like the idea of Last Ditch Effort is always very appealing to me. It feels like I always end up with an LDE somewhere in my deck. Maybe because I head out with Arachne a little bit more often than I should. And that is a card that is usually making the cut. Yeah, I think Nourishing Emptiness is another one too. Like any spot where I can basically work in a Nourishing Emptiness. It's just a very satisfying card to play.
Yeah, when it works, it works. Remember the old days when you were scrambling for good sixes to throw in Levia, and you're like, oh, I could sometimes do something with Nourishing Emptiness in that deck. Now, this is a new question that we started asking. What class and talent would you be if you were a hero in this game?
Probably a bard.
Okay.
I think that's my most natural fit. I want to say something cool like a ranger or an assassin, but we just have to be a little bit more realistic here. I probably am not very good at assassinating people. I haven't tried. I mean, maybe I should just give it a shot and see what I'm good at. But thus far, I have not committed any assassinations, so I can't speak to that.
It would be R&D, right?
Yeah, just good, good groundwork, good research. I'm sure the police will be happy with that explanation.
It was in international waters. You were testing out Riptide stuff. Great answers, Brian. We do have
Adjudicator is another one that I guess I should probably bear some guilt for, I will say. Like I guess I am a retired lawyer at this point, so I don't still have my license. But I was previously an adjudicator of sorts.
Great answer. Well, what talent actually would you be?
Probably Shadow.
Yeah.
Like
It's the coolest one.
yeah, it is cool. I think there's good in Shadow for what it's worth. I don't think I'm evil. Like that's not necessarily what I'm trying to say. But there's probably a darkness in me that mandates that I have to be Shadow. So
That is totally fair. I understand that one with all my being. Now, we do have listener questions. These come from the Buds Discord. Anybody is free to join. It's in the show notes below. We will go through and Brian will answer whichever ones he can. And yeah, thanks for submitting these questions, everyone. First one comes from Sigma, who says, everyone's been discussing Necromancer and Alchemist, pretty often, but there's a class no one mentions, Cleric. I wouldn't say no one mentions it. I hear Cleric get brought up. Is it a class we'll ever see in CC, or is it going to be more oriented to PvE or UPF?
we'll see. We'll see. That just is not a question that I can answer at this stage. We will see.
That is fair. That is fair. Orc Knight, aka Jesse Harper, asked, how much of an effect do you predict Rosetta will have on metagames or heroes that are currently not in CC? And thank you again for signing his Talishar.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to sign that Talishar. I remember it very, very well. Huge binder full of Talishars from folks around the community. Less than Part the Misveil, more than maybe the sets that preceded it.
Okay.
Talking like heavy hitters-ish range would be my guesstimation. Always just a guess, but yeah, that's where I'm guessing for the time being.
Well, we're all very excited about it. Next question comes from Turtle Matern, who, asks, is any work currently being done to make a classic constructed Bard hero? If not, are you willing to listen to a PowerPoint presentation on what a Bard class could be in Flesh and Blood?
I am not willing to listen to that presentation, but I have made CC intended Bard heroes before. Now, that's not to say they're coming. I just want to share kind of some of my design process. I just make things sometimes. No home for them, no intention for them. I just make them to explore them and see what they look like. I've made CC Bard heroes before. Again, I don't dodge these questions because I don't want to answer them. It's just, I don't know. I if the time is right, if we have the right story we want to tell, if the mechanics all fit, there's no reason a Bard can't be a CC hero. There's no reason any of these classes can't be CC heroes. We don't put those kind of limitations on ourselves. It's all about what fits, what's exciting, what's cool. If it ever fits and is exciting, it will happen.
Well, we will see if they ever come to light. Capola asked, is there a talent mechanic or cards that got scrapped during R&D of a set? If yes, could you please share? I'm sure you cannot, but
there are so many. so many. It is not a straight line to go from set conception to finish. And I generally cannot share because they don't make the cut the first time doesn't mean we won't come back around to them. And we've done that several times. I guess by way of giving somewhat of an answer, I will share that first efforts around Assassin, the regicide mechanic. So basically you can't defend with cards that have been banished. That was hero power as opposed to just on regicide. And it didn't work. It was quite annoying, quite cumbersome to check all the time. And so we scrapped that and it ended up being present on regicide instead. And I'm happy sharing that one because just kind of doing the exploration around that mechanic led me to believe that mechanic will never work as a hero power. It's not something that you want around all the time. So I don't think that one will come back around. I should never say never.
Yeah.
There's always possibilities, new ways to do things. But there's a little tidbit for you to take away so I don't just dodge the question fully.
William from the Table Pit asks, I have previously criticized the UPF rule of you can only attack target to your right or left. I have since played a ton of games with RTT and sets that came after, and I want to take it all back. Oh, I guess round the table. I knew that. UPF feels really good right now, and I'd love to know when we might see another round the table product in the future, if at all.
There will be more UPF stuff in the future. That's the extent of my answer to this question. Won't get into specifics, but there will be more UPF stuff in the future.
Very cool. It was an awesome product. Pat Shaw asks, what is your biggest lesson learned from building MST and seeing how the player base has handled it this season that you think you'll take with you to future sets?
I mentioned Traverse as like a very focused lesson, but more broadly, I think there are some lessons to take away about what happens when an aggro deck is the best deck and what sorts of aggro decks should be the best decks. And to me, KO was a very successful best deck. Very successful. It did what it was supposed to do in the metagame as an aggressive deck. It felt powerful, fearsome, but not overwhelming. Didn't really feel like your agency was stripped from you. I think Zen does not deliver quite as well as KO does when it comes to best aggro deck in the format. And so definitely taking some lessons away from how to make a successful aggro deck, one that plays a little bit better for players on both sides of the table.
That's fair. That's fair. Darth Prentice, aka Greg, I would love to know if there are any wacky alternative formats that the devs play together for fun.
Not for fun. We don't do anything for fun. But we've been working on some alt formats. Been looking at some stuff.
Very cool.
Cryptic answer. That's as good as I can do.
All right. That's all right. Dead Summer Art asks, when you were previously on this podcast, you mentioned that your favorite region is one we hadn't been to yet. Now that Heavy Hitters has been released, was it the Deathmatch Arena? And then also asked, what are Florian and Osilia's pronouns?
It was the Deathmatch Arena. I remember that question, and that's what I was alluding to. And then for the next question, now, I don't always have the most up-to-date lore knowledge. I do discuss lore with the creative team. We have meetings and we kind of set things up, but also things evolve beyond my input. So take these with a grain of salt. I believe both of these heroes are he, him. Perhaps that's changed since I've last been updated on it, but that is where I last knew them to be sitting on the gender spectrum. To that point, I know that this is a huge ask from many of our fans, and they want to see more genders represented in the game. Non-binary folks certainly will appear in the game at some point. We want to absolutely include everyone along the gender spectrum. Flesh and Blood is for everyone, and that includes the heroes of Flesh and Blood. And you will absolutely see that as time goes on.
That's great to hear. Love that. Gary, aka Mr. Viz, has been asking this question to the void for a long time. I know this. Blitz Viscerai when? It's been 2 years, Brian. How long is this man's quest?
He's out there doing stuff. Got Viscerai business to handle. Some point.
We
didn't forget about him.
Yeah.
I know he's out there.
Next question comes from Roy, who asks, I'd love to hear Brian's thoughts on the commoner format when you do your interview with him. This is including, do you guys discuss it? Are you guys testing it? Are you looking at the format at any other kind of like microscope of sorts?
Yeah, do not test it. Don't have time to. I'll be frank about that. Do stay abreast of it. Get whenever we can deck lists. We have folks in the community that we talk to from time to time about the commoner format to check in on it, see how things are going. That includes folks who work for LSS. If you know Kasharn. Kasharn's a huge fan of Commoner. In fact, played the Commoner event out in Amsterdam. So always tries to stay as close to that as possible. And we take input from all of those folks. And we do consider things and how they're going to impact Commoner. We absolutely have those discussions while we're developing sets. And rarities have changed around the Commoner format before. So we try to give it as much attention as we can. It just can't be a focal point of our development efforts. That's just reality of the time crunches we're under. But we care about it, and we try to do our best to stay abreast of it and have a good finger on the pulse of what's going on in that metagame.
It's cool. Sounds cool. Rabbit had a pretty long question, but I had to distill it down to one kind of thing here, and it touched on what we talked about with MST already. But how much do you take criticism to heart when designing new sets?
A lot. Like it really does affect me, and that's not like, again, not seeking sympathy or saying anyone has to stop. That's not
Mhm.
my goal here. Like I know what my job is. I know what I signed up for. Um, but I care so fucking much. Like I really do. It is my life. I want Flesh and Blood to be the best game on the planet. I believe it is the best game on the planet, but I want it to be even better. That's not enough for me. And then any mistake we make, I take as a personal failing. I hate messing things up. And it sucks to hear when people feel like you have messed things up because I don't want to let anyone down. I want everyone to love Flesh and Blood. Um, I have worked a lot on trying to kind of not take it as personally and not take it as hard because I do know it is just, a very challenging job and one that you can't please everyone, all those things. But I won't say I'm perfect at it, man. I really do uh, build a lot of my personality around delivering something special. And when I feel that other people feel I've missed the mark or we've missed the mark, because I take the entire team's successes and failures as my own. Like I don't distinguish between individual decision. Anything that comes out under the Flesh and Blood banner, I look at as reflecting upon me, and I care a lot about that. Um, so yeah, that's a struggle of mine, and I have to really be careful about how much I let that affect me. And it's one of the reasons why I stepped away from Twitter, is because it did kind of trend very negative a lot of the time, and it was so jarring. And I reached the decision in the aftermath of Pro Tour LA because I was in LA, right?
Mhm.
And I had just cast this incredible top eight and had spoken to everyone all week in LA, and everyone's like, Heavy Hitters is so great. We're really enjoying the format. Love this, love everything about the game. I'm having such a good time. And it's just positive, positive, positive. And I'm like on this high, right? And I just want more of that. So I
Mhm.
get back and I'm like super active on Twitter. I want to talk about everything and, you know, describe it, get into every discussion basically, and challenge people where I feel like they're wrong and accept people when I feel like they're right, and just be in there because I'm so stoked and everyone seems so excited. And then it just became this like angry, we hate limited, we hate this format's all numbers. And I'm like, what's happening? I just came from a place where we were all happy, we were all having a great time, we were all celebrating what was going on. And then I came back to this digital space and it seemed like everything was terrible. And I couldn't engage in that same fashion anymore. And I realized, like, one, social media is not reflective of the real world.
Mhm.
I know that. Two, it amplifies these divisive things by algorithm. It intentionally does so. When things are more divisive, they get brought to the forefront. Um, and so I just realized, like, this is not providing a positive mental health experience for me. And more importantly, it's not providing a positive outcome with regards to my job. It's not making me a better game designer, game developer. It's making me sad. It's making me angry.
Mhm.
And those emotions aren't going to make me a better developer. And that's why I stepped away. And there are moments where I regret that choice. I spoke to a lot of folks in Amsterdam who they were disappointed. I wasn't as present in social media spaces anymore. Always understanding. Like nobody was ever like, you should come back to Twitter right now. Everyone was like, please stay away. Do not come back. You are making the correct decision, but I miss you. And that was nice to hear. I really did appreciate that. Um, but yeah, it was just kind of this dawning moment where I realized because I do take these things so personally and so much to heart, I needed to put a little bit of distance between myself and the criticism. And I still have to balance that with hearing that criticism.
Mhm.
And it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I saw a really great tweet about it today. And I do still monitor Twitter. I want people to know that. Like I'm still watching what people say. It was from Risk the Redeemed. I don't have the tweet in front of me, but I'll paraphrase it. It was basically exactly what I've been thinking for so long. And she stated that players are so used to being in a sort of dismissive relationship from their stalwarts of their TCG, basically speaking about Magic
Mhm.
and feeling like when it comes to Magic, they don't care about the competitive scene. They don't listen to the player base. They don't take seriously complaints. They're not plugged into what's happening, down at the format level. And like, I think some of these criticisms are fair. Magic is making a different product right now. They are making a mass market collectible. They are making Funko Pops, and there's a game on the backside of it. And there's a lot of people in that organization who care so deeply about that game and want to make the best game possible. And they're fighting tooth and nail to do that. And I appreciate them so much. And I know it must be so hard on them because they have such passion for the game. But there's this like corporate juggernaut just rolling over what was beautiful about that space. That's not the case in Flesh and Blood. We are all motivated by the quality of our game first and foremost. First and foremost, we're motivated by the quality of our formats. We're motivated by player enjoyment, sitting down. Like, I don't give a shit how many packs of Part the Mistveil you purchased if you aren't having a good time sitting down and playing the game. It's completely irrelevant to me. And that is very different from when a corporate entity is driving things. And I will promise you that James feels the exact same way. Like Flesh and Blood is a game first and foremost. It will always be a game first and foremost. And it's supposed to deliver this tremendous experience. And so for years and years in Magic, you had to go out and you had to bang the drum on Twitter, begging for bans. Please, this format's broken. Please pay attention to us. Listen to us. We don't want to play this anymore. And you had to be angry and confrontational and hope that you could maybe get some attention and get the result you were hoping for. You don't have to do that with Flesh and Blood. Like I sat and played nothing but games of this current format for 2 weeks leading up to Pro Tour Amsterdam. I lived it. I am right there with you. I know everything that's happening. I understand what's going on. I and I'm not trying to dodge responsibility for the people who like don't like the state of the game. I'm not saying, oh, this product's not for you, go buy something else. Like I'm listening to you, I'm hearing you. And I think people are so used to having to have this confrontational mindset when it comes to their game that it just drips into Flesh and Blood where it doesn't have to.
Mhm.
And I've always crusaded against that. I've always wanted it to be better, but overcoming an entire TCG culture is really hard. You can't just reset 30 years of learned behaviors overnight. And so it's just something I've been thinking about a lot lately. It wraps into this exact discussion. I don't even remember how I got here, honestly. I'm on a complete tangent at this point. But just this is how I live my life. Like I think about one Flesh and Blood related idea and it sends me down these spirals. And I'm always thinking about the big picture and how to better serve players. And I just really want everyone to know and understand that. Know that I care very deeply. All of our developers care very deeply. James, Chris, everyone else, they all care so deeply. And we really do have your best interests at heart always. And that's the biggest takeaway I would like anyone to have from this particular interview.
Absolutely. And it's easy to focus on the negative, so I would implore people to focus on the positives. What's one positive thing that happened this week? The Tall Timmy, another creator that we all loved, took a step away, is making a triumphant return. It's so cool. James White's tweeting about that, right? That's the creator of this game
Love that dude. James loves that dude too,
He's
and
the
absolutely thrilled to see him back.
it's the best. It's it's so cool. It's very exciting. Super excited about that. But that's just an example of like that's the person who is creating this game. The person that came up with Flesh and Blood is heralding these things. It's very cool, and and for the Twitter thing, Twitter's terrible sometimes. Yeah. So like I totally understand, but we know that you're watching. You're always watching.
I appreciate that, and yeah. I know that. Like again, I know like most people understand this. Yeah. I really do. Like it is not. I don't want to paint it like a pervasive problem, but yeah, it is. It is very genuine. Like we all care very deeply about this game, and I was thinking about this as well. Like I was reflecting on how I end up in these spaces, like these TCG spaces, and I kind of like other myself, right? And by that, I mean there's this barrier where now I work on the development side, and that always is going to change the tone of any conversation I have with anyone. And that's really hard sometimes because like just somebody who also loves Flesh and Blood, and I just want to talk with people who love Flesh and Blood like somebody who loves Flesh and Blood, and you kind of rob yourself of the opportunity to do so. Not to complain, there's no part of me that's complaining. I am extremely blessed to live my life, but it crosses my mind sometimes, and I just want to like welcome everyone to engage with me like somebody who loves Flesh and Blood, because that is who I am, and I am there and plugged in and living the same experience as you are. I promise you. And maybe it's for different stakes, right? Like I don't go to compete at the Pro Tour for $50,000, but I do go to compete to put my reputation as a game designer and a game developer on the line. I absolutely look at it that way because it means that much to me. And I do take criticism so harshly. When I show up to the Pro Tour, there's just as much at stake for me as there is for you as a participant. And I care a lot about the experience we're giving you.
Well, I can only say from my experience, the game has only gotten better since you've been a part of it, Bryan. And you have been, I do a little bit miss the refreshing, stances on Twitter, but I totally understand taking a step away from it. And sometimes I wish I could take a step away from it. So you're not alone in that. Now, I have one more question. Well, actually, two more questions, if you don't mind. First one, I don't know how much you can actually speak to this one, but Jeff O asked, what has LSS learned from the Blaze distribution? Do you feel it succeeded in what it was intended to do? There's a lot of talk about skirmish season coming up and not a lot of people being able to get Blazes at a relatively cheap price. But I'm not sure if that's something you can comment on.
Yeah, I can't. It's just not something I have any control over or even work around. But I would put forth that as much as I listen to criticisms, that goes for every single part of LSS. And people are listening, people are hearing your experiences. So I can't speak on what will happen in the future, but certainly we've heard the feedback. I spoke to folks in Amsterdam who shared similar concerns about Blaze. I promise they're all being passed along to appropriate places, and we'll see what happens from here.
Thank you. There was a question I meant to ask earlier. This one's from me, actually. This is my listener question. Who are some players that you as the dev team look at and get excited about to see those players pilot these heroes that you design? And who are some deck builders that you get super excited to see what they come up with these cards that you put out into the world?
There's so many, so many. On the deck building side, I mean, I'll just give a shout out to Shoma. Not that he needs more shout outs right now, but certainly seeing what Shoma did this past weekend was jaw dropping, incredible in every single way. Maybe, the best pure story that Flesh and Blood has ever had is Shoma's rise over Pro Tour Amsterdam weekend. As far as folks that I want to know what they're playing when I walk in the door, like my first priority, Charles Dunn, very, very high on that list. I think just extremely, extremely good deck builder, fellow game dev / designer as well. So respect for somebody working in the same field and still finding time to succeed at our game. I'm not very good at Diablo 4. So I do play, actually, Charles. So if you've got tips for me, feel free to share. But yeah, not very good there. But Charles is incredible. And fantastic deck builder and really starting to show range that he knew he had, but has always been kind of wrapped up as the fatigue guy, right? Showing a lot more range than that in recent times. So always curious what Charles is playing. Nick Butcher, very, very high on that list. Always like to see what Nick shows up with. Nick was playing Contract New this weekend and alongside Matt Rogers. And those guys, I say this weekend, we're a few weekends past now. But they had a unique take on New, which actually reminded me a lot of how Chris Gehring and I built New for our internal dev tournament. We played a very contract heavy version of New. So it's cool to see those guys bring that to the table. And I think Nick in particular is just one of those people who's like, there's more here and I'm going to find the answer. He played Dawnblade Dorinthia at Pro Tour LA. Just very, very adaptable deck builder. I'd put Hayden Dale in the same category. Did very well this national season with Dash, unique take on Dash. And I love Hayden because his deck building, if you just kind of looked at his deck list, you could just be like, oh, a Dash deck and move on.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this level of nuance, this level of every single card mattering, every single small detail mattering that always is reflected in his deck list that I think really just shows a tremendous fundamental understanding of Flesh and Blood. And then you want to talk players. I could watch Team Blue Pitch play all day long. And they're such like fun people. They have such joy for the game. They have such support for each other. You know, I interviewed Pudding and Pudding was saying it means just as much to me if Shing wins as if I do. Like that's the kind of teammates that are going to find success and find each other in a top 8 alongside each other a second time in less than a calendar year. So those guys are so impressive. Just a tremendous team. They show up with way fewer members than the average super team and are just always, always, always in the mix, either in the top 8, top 16. And like I said, when we were doing the Pro Tour and kind of creating this narrative, I don't know that Pudding actually got the respect he deserved when it came to these Zen lists. I promise you, before that show match with the card guys, I was still in plenty of Discords. And look, I know there's exceptions. I know other people were starting to make headway as well. But there was a lot of spaces that were just like, Zen is terrible. This hero's crap. Why did LSS print all this hate? I got receipts. Like, I'll go copy paste if you want to debate with me. I promise you it's out there. But once Pudding showed up to that match and really had built out the Bonds list, it was very clear that he had found a very special list. So I guess in terms of now, I mentioned them as players, but got to give him his respect as a deck builder as well. Just incredible stuff there.
Yeah, just so impressive, just kind of how they burst on the scene the past year and just keep impressing. And I don't think we're getting rid of them in these top 8s.
They will be fixtures. The hardest part for them is travel, quite frankly. And that's kind of the only reprieve the rest of the world gets. If they're all able to show up and be present at an event, y'all are in trouble.
Yeah. Well, just don't give them Brody Spurlock's travel agent, and then I think we're pretty good.
Combine those two teams, man, that would be something.
Yeah, that would be something else. Now, not a question, but it comes from Go Again Gaming, and I think we can all resonate with this statement. Continue doing great work, Bryan. We love you, and you are an awesome addition to the Flesh and Blood world, and we're very happy to have you. So there you have that.
I appreciate that, And shoot me some info about that bike ride that you're trying to put together in Osaka. I'm interested. I don't know if I will be in good enough shape to take it on, but I would like to be. So a man can dream.
It does seem like a good time, although Az will definitely be bringing a few pints if I know him on the ride. So thank you, Bryan. This was really awesome. I really appreciate you coming on again. This is a lot of fun chatting with you. I'd like you to plug anything you'd like to plug. Now, I know you're not really on Twitter so much anymore, but you do have
Flesh
an account.
Blood, man. Just keep playing Flesh and Blood. Check out Rosetta. Check out First Strike. And I really do encourage people to think about the bridge that we've tried to create with this set. Those First Strike decks are out there. And with 8 packs and sealed, you can basically guarantee you can play any hero you want. You show up to a pre-release and you go, I am going to play Aurora. You will be fine. You will have a very, very functional Aurora deck. So if you're somebody who just wants to get your feet wet, you want to get comfortable with the idea of, playing a limited tournament, but you don't really know where to start, you find it a little overwhelming, go in, get your first strike deck, get comfortable with Aurora, go show up to the limited event, say I'm building Aurora no matter what, put aside all your Aurora cards, make a nice 30 card deck. You can't go wrong. We're really trying to make it so that your onboarding process is safe. I promise you too, everyone in your local game store will love to have you. They will take the time to help you. Nobody's going to make you feel bad for being a beginner. That's not what Flesh and Blood is about. We're about sharing with people this thing we love, making it welcoming. I have every confidence that all of our folks will do that coming up with this Rosetta world premiere season.
It's going to be very, very fun. I cannot wait. You all can continue to find me on Twitter still at freshbudspod. I am still, trudging through all the negativity and the positivity. There is some there. Please check out the Buds Discord. It's in the show notes below, as well as the YouTube. Give a like, comment, subscribe. Another podcast I do with my cousin, Fresh Juice, where we talk about indie video games. A lot of fun over there. And finally, Brian, I always like to end the show talking about food. What's something you're craving or really enjoying right now?
I am missing most of my food places in Auckland right now. It's been too long. And I actually love the food in Auckland. I think it's incredible. Right across the street from our studio, we have a Vietnamese place. They do an incredible vegetarian pho. I get it like 3 days a week when I'm there. I haven't had it now in 2 months. I miss it. Maybe more importantly, the Chinese food in Auckland is not Americanized Chinese food. It is authentic Chinese food. A lot of these rich, oily, spicy noodle dishes. And there's another place, a couple blocks from our studio, where we tend to go on Fridays, where we take time for a little bit longer lunch. And they have these amazing hand-pulled noodles, and I am just daydreaming about them at this point. I miss them so much. Can't wait to get back and have some very, very good Auckland authentic Chinese food.
Sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Brian. We unfortunately don't have time for Charmer, but I'm sure we'll get to him at some point. Thank you all, and please stay fresh.